Hi, everybody.
Happy Tuesday.
Welcome back to another hour, more or less, of good nature. Um, you can see some things haven't changed. Tree guy supposedly was out. I was out pretty much all day on Saturday, and he was supposed to come by then and take a look at things. We have not set a date yet to get this cleaned up. So just keep, yeah, just have to, maybe I could put my head this way. It's a little less distracting when we do that. Um, it's been a busy week. Uh, in a happy twist of fate, I've been able to spend quite a bit of my assignments over the last week have been outside, which has been nice. And tomorrow I get to go out again to prep for a program we have on Saturday. It's always nice. I love it when you guys send me things, and I do get an awful lot of items that people email or text me to share. But when I can share some things that I've seen too, that makes it even more fun. With that said, tonight's show and tell is actually, this was a gift from a friend who found not one and not two, but three feathers. Um, very, very fluffy feathers, I should add. In fact, I had these out today. I was doing some of our outreach to local retirement centers, and this particular one happened to be a senior living community for assisted living people, and they just had the most fun just doing this. They didn't care what the well, actually a couple of them did care what the owl species was, but they just were so anxious to have that touch of nature, so happy to feel that. So yeah, owls are the sort of bird that a lot of what they do depends on silent flight, and they've got a lot of adaptations on their body. One that we tend to talk a lot about the adaptations on the wing feathers, but we don't always mention that really their whole body is made for muffling sound. There's layer upon layer of sound muffling feathers. There's down even underneath this layer. Um, I believe these came from the body feathering of what I'm going to guess is a young owl. The person who found these said that there had been quite a bit of commotion in the tree. I sort of wonder if this was like, sometimes you find a bunch of feathers on the ground. It means something not so good happened to the owner of those feathers, the previous owner of those feathers. But in this case, I kind of wonder if maybe there was a little sibling rivalry. We are at the time of year where the great horned owls in this area, by and large, unless there was an extremely late nest attempt, they are now done for the season with the nesting part of their annual life cycle. But those young that have fledged are still very much under the care of their parents, and they're gaining skills a little bit at a time, but they're still uh, um, begging pretty much every night for food. So I kind of wonder if maybe there was, um, you know, one owl took out another, took, you know, took the treat that mom or dad had brought in, maybe a nice juicy rabbit leg or something. And there was a little bit of a tussle because there were just these three feathers on the ground. That's something too to keep an ear out for. I know we've played some recordings in the past of the sounds of juvenile or immature great horned owls. They're our biggest owl and probably our most common owl species in this area. And they don't sound at all like mom and dad as immature birds. I think they sound kind of like cats. Um, and they're definitely whiny and very repetitive, which is another a sign that you're listening to an immature bird. They just, until they get what they want, they just keep going. And with owls, it's at night. It's up in a tree. I've had people tell me that they've been woken up by the repetitive begging of a neighborhood owl youngster. So yeah, so these just to cover a little bit of legalities. You probably also heard that Well, if you haven't heard, it's a good thing to know, to just pick up feathers and collect feathers. That's been a conservation law no since I think it was 1918 in the passage of the Migratory Bird Act. You know, back in the 1800s, people didn't really think anything of uh, killing birds just to get a few feathers to put in a hat. It was considered very fashionable to wear. Sometimes it'd be like an entire wing or all the tail feathers. Some of our birds that grow breeding plumes were particularly subject to that sort of bad behavior on the part of humans. So in order to keep these, I've filled out a line. We have a form that we turn it here to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They're the ones that are charged with enforcing the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So I'll write down on our report at the end of the year that we got not one and not two, but three great horned owl feathers. It'll go on that permit, and we'll get to keep them. We'll get to teach with them, just like that. One other thing, this is a show and tell thing. And Jerry, I don't know if you're on tonight, but one of our loyal, good-natured followers recently took a trip overseas and was in Barcelona, or I believe, as they say over there, Barcelona. And Jerry took a lot of cool photos. She also took some video, and this one I thought was kind of neat. I'm going to play it, and then we're going to talk about it. So fingers crossed that all the good video vibes are coming down from the universe for us tonight, because last week was kind of a bust in a lot of ways, but I think we've got things working now. I'm going to open this up. I'm going to share the screen. All right, I'm going to optimize for video, and then I'm going to pull this up. Okay, so let's get this to play. Look at this black bird running along, hopping, feeding. Let's watch it again. Pay particular attention to its the way that it kind of runs and hops and stops. Look at the position of the tail and just the general shape of the bird, and see if it reminds you of anything you might have. Run, stop, look around, run, stop, around, stop, look around, eat something. I'm going to do it again, and then I'm going to stop it. Stop it. Pop, 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 pop. My point, and I do have one, is that this bird moves very much like an American robin. Now that I've said that, let's watch it again. Stop, stop, stop. Run. Hop, hop, hop. Stop, hop, hop, run, stop. Can you just picture a differently colored bird doing that sort of behavior in a yard or a park nearby? American robins are probably one of our most common species in this area. They are members of the thrush family, the Turdidae. So are these blackbirds, the European blackbird. So here in North America, our blackbirds are icterids. There's and we've got grackles, we've got red-winged blackbirds, yellow-headed blackbirds, brown-headed cowbirds. Those are a few of the example. In fact, orioles, I believe, are in the blackbird family too. And those are examples of blackbirds here in North America. In Europe, the bird they call the blackbird is black, but it's a thrush. So it is related. It is in the same family as our American robins, whereas the things we call blackbirds here in the United States are not related, that closely related to American robins. Now, this is a bird, I think I've written about it a couple of different times. When I wrote back to Jerry, I think I said, Oh, we've got some nature flying in here. Let's see if we can grab this for a little while. Um, I think I told her that the 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie were this bird, and I think they were. There was research going back a few hundred years to when that verse was written, and it was kind of a thing to liven up the somewhat boring days of the royalty, and they would actually put a pie crust over a bird, a bunch of birds, to you know, make a dainty dish to set before a king. That's how it goes. Uh, the other reference that you probably recognize to this bird is the Christmas Carol, the 12 Days of Christmas. Uh, Tonight's your lucky night. I'm not going to sing it, but the four we now mostly sing four calling birds. Well, the original lyrics for that song were for collie birds, Collie, not collie as in the herding breed, but collie as in coal colored birds. The collie bird was also this blackbird, the European blackbird, the member of the thrush family. So thanks, Jerry. I don't know if you're on tonight. Laura, I think you might be. But this is kind of a cool thing. Should you find yourself in Europe, you might want to check them out. Okay, okay. I'm going to stop this share because the cool bit of nature is just dying to get away from us. So I'm going to see if I can hold this up. I actually have photos of this that we were going to talk about. Now, how can I get this to focus? Do I move back? This is one of those woolly aphids. Up, and there it goes. It really does look like a little fairy flying through the air. Yeah, I was hoping it might, make a pass by the camera so you could see it. I actually have some photos of one because we were going to talk about it in a little while in comparison to an insect photo that I received in an email question last week. So maybe it's better to look at the still image anyway, because that was kind of blurry. But if it passes back through again, that'll be pretty neat, huh? Okay, so we did the feathers, we did the video. So last week, those of you who were on last week, we were coming through some storms. I kind of think that my internet connection here at home was a little unstable for a few days. I didn't realize how bad it was till I tried to talk to you last week, and you kept disappearing, or I kept disappearing. This week, I think things are much better. So I'm actually going to show a couple of slides that we did not get to last week, and then we will launch into the news from this most recent week. So let's see, I'm going to do another share, and we're going to go to, I'll just pick screen. I'm going to close this, and so July 11th was last week, and this is right where the connection started to not cooperate. So this you probably recognize as a daddy longlegs. This is an arachnid, and there's a lot of sayings like this where all things are. Well, I'll just say this: all daddy longlegs are arachnids, but not all arachnids are daddy longlegs. So they're in that that classification. They have 8 legs, as we can see here. They've got some really cool mouth parts. I'm going to see if we can zoom in on here. This is a creature that's got a reputation. If you talk to kids that are looking at daddy longlegs, more often than not, you're going to hear from one of them that, oh, these are the most venomous creatures in the world. They just don't have fangs that can pierce human skin. And that's actually true of a lot of, not the deadly part, but just the part about fangs. Most of our local spiders can't pierce human skin either. But look at the setup these guys have. They really are geared up for being predators, which they can be. They do eat soft-bodied insects. Where I used to find them a lot, when I worked down at Red Oak, we always had uh, quite a few spider webs by intention. We just didn't knock them down around our outside lights, and more often than not, we would see daddy longlegs that appeared to be scavenging amongst um, the detritus there in spider webs, exoskeletons that maybe still had a little bit of yeah, juice inside of them, a little bit of protein. Um, so they will scavenge. And I don't know how they must know how to walk on these webs and not get tangled up themselves, because I've seen it on a number of occasions. Um, they will also, as I said, they will catch and feed on soft-bodied insects. And then they also, I've seen them feeding on things like uh, black raspberries, mulberries. They'll sometimes there'll be several of them, and I think they might be getting some nutrition there, and they're most certainly getting moisture from feeding on fruit like that. So a very varied diet for our friends, the daddy longlegs. I should also mention they're not spiders. They've got 8 legs, but they only have one body part. Here's a view from the top. By the way, this is kind of a greenish, weird light. This is the vestibule of Good Natured World headquarters. We have, I don't know if it's green light bulbs in the fixture in the hallway, or if the glass of the fixture is green and therefore the light is green. But it's why the color is a little wonky on this. But here's a view from the top down. Now, to be a spider, an organism needs to have 2 distinct body parts. In our friends, the daddy longlegs, they have this kind of one all-purpose parts fused together. There are labels to the different parts of this main body part, but it is essentially just one main body part. So that disqualifies them from getting to be called a spider. They're actually in their own order called Opiliones, and I'm not sure if I labeled this photo or not. No, I didn't. Opiliones. I always thought it sounded like an Italian restaurant. Hey, let's go down to Opiliones and get a big pile of mostaccioli. Opiliones is the group that these creatures belong to. Right after I took this photo, I received this one in a text from a coworker. So quick glance, you're thinking, wow, that's a different type of daddy longlegs. Its legs are dark and it's got a red body. And look, it's got weird little projections. Well, if we zoom in on this, what we see is that, yes, the body is somewhat reddish. It's actually kind of a brick orangish brown color, but those red projections there are mites. And we do see this at this time of year. And something kind of fun to look for if you happen to notice some daddy longlegs out and about. Whenever we see mites on a creature, the question is, are they harmful? I'm not sure. I have not really done a whole lot of research into mite and daddy longleg interactions. Some mites that we see in this area, they simply use the creature that we find them on as a means of transportation. I'm thinking particularly of the mites we find on carrion beetles. They hop on a carrion beetle, they ride to a carcass, they jump off, they feed on I think it's usually fly larvae that they feed on. In this case, they may well be feeding on the daddy longlegs. I'm not sure, especially these ones that are writing here on the body. If they are feeding, it is a case of one arachnid feeding on another arachnid, because our mites in their mature stage have 8 legs too. Oh, no, there's one more picture here. So I received this photo. This was taken at Bussy Woods. So not local as in Kane County, but nearby. And you've probably seen snails in our area. We certainly have a lot of aquatic snails. We have a fair number of uh, terrestrial snails as well. I'd never seen one as snazzy as this before. And uh, just for future reference, you can find this out now as I did. Bug Guide does not cover mollusks. So there was nothing in my favorite online guide, Bug Guide, to go by. But I did a little Googling around. There is some information on these snails on iNaturalist, but I haven't really gotten savvy enough with my navigation in iNaturalist to use that for identification. But I did find, as I was looking around for how to identify snails, I'm going to switch over to this website. It's the Terrestrial Mollusk Tool. And it gives all kinds of handy hints of how to identify snails that live on land. Um, it talks about the parts of shells and what you need to know to identify them. It starts off very basic. Does it have a shell? Does it not? Because terrestrial mollusks not only include our land snails, but they also include our slugs. Since we're here, this is another fun little game. Should you be rolling logs or looking under rocks and you see some slugs, take a look at the right side. This is where they breed. This little hole here opens and closes. Doesn't have to be these particular species of slugs. You can see it on any of the slugs we have around here. Bigger slugs, bigger holes, smaller slugs, smaller holes, but it's pretty cool. Can you guys hear who's joined us? That is the oscillating drone of a scissor grinder cicada. Hopefully that came through for you. They will probably continue for a few minutes longer. I should say, might continue for a few minutes longer. That is one of the cicada, of the 4 cicada species we have in this area, that sings pretty late. They shut down just before the night crew, our katydids and our crickets, gear up and sing through the night. It's a little early for katydids, but we're spot on right time for cicadas. Anyway, got distracted, sorry. Here we are looking at this terrestrial mollusk tool. So going through the things that we're looking at here, it talks about the parts of the shell. And when you think of it, even though it's a fairly simple animal, there's lots of things to consider in terms of the shape. And these different shapes, there are parts, names to the different parts. And you need to consider, how many spirals does it have? Does it have wrinkles or pleats? All these different things factor in to the identification of your snail. So I had a little fun playing around with this. The upside of it was that we came up with a tentative identification here of a brown lip snail, which is an introduced species. They have come here from Europe. I think they're really cool looking. And if I told the gentleman who set this photo in, I said, boy, if you find another one of those, I bet they'd make kind of a cool pet. I actually have, that should be a guest sometime. Maybe I'll bring that up next week. I have gallon jug in my family room that is housing a Chinese mystery snail, which is another introduced species, one that can actually spread some pathogens in local aquatic systems. So when I find a lot of dead shells of Chinese mystery snails, but that one was alive. So I scooped it up, brought it home, and it's feeding on some invasive aquatic plants that I gave it. So you can have a whole invasive ecosystem of your own. So this, again, this was found, I believe it was in Bussy Woods. I don't know if there's an existing population there. Usually if there's one, there's more. Something though to keep an eye out for. And if you do happen to run across them out here in King County, I would love to hear about it. All right, so that wraps up what we weren't able to get to last week. I'm going to go back over here and start us up with our slides from this week, which do not start with this one. Let me scroll up here. So, Greg, I don't know if you're on tonight, but I have to thank you again for your wonderful take on this not so wonderful plant. Last year, Greg and Kelly, who are regular subscribers here, had gone on a bike ride down on the CalSag channel and come across this plant here known as Teasel. And Teasel is the kind of plant that once you see it, you really have trouble forgetting it. It's very, very spiky, as Greg wrote. You'll notice if you read the good-natured column in the newspaper, here's a little teaser. This week's column is largely written by Greg and his impressions of this plant. And once you get a handle on just how invasive it is, the question becomes, well, what do you do to control it? I'd actually done a little checking around in the park district because there's a very prominent property here in St. Charles. It's the old Great Western Railroad tracks. Teasel likes to grow where it's sunny, and a lot of railroad tracks are historically they were kept very clear so that the trains could go through, and especially here in Illinois, a lot of them traverse through prairie areas. So railroad tracks are certainly what qualify as disturbed ground, and that is where Teasel thrives. There are lots of places here in St. Charles that the park district has been trying to acquire the former Great Western rail bed so that we can complete a trail hookup, a bicycle trail hookup with the Great Western Trailhead that's over at Leroy Oaks on the west side of town. Local folks, probably know what I'm talking about. UP, Union Pacific, who currently owns that right of way, or that, what would you call it? Not an easement. They own the land that used to be a railroad. And as our superintendent put it, they've tried for years to get the railroad to sell, but you can't buy something that's not for sale. Apparently Union Pacific has a lot of other things to worry about. And so meanwhile, this land is getting covered with all kinds of invasives, including this species here. Well, if you happen to look at that and recognize it, one, you might recognize it from floral arrangements. It is and has been for some time popular in especially fall arrangements. And I've even seen some Christmas arrangements where they've taken the dried seed heads of Teasel and spray painted them gold or red or green and put them, because they are striking. I'll give you that. But they are so prolific in the seeds that they produce. This is the time of year when these plants are in flower that you can go out and you can snip off the stalks that they grow on. Now the stalks can be pretty tall. I took this picture the other day. I went out to kind of survey where some of the major Teasel areas are here in St. Charles. This one happens to be up off of Redgate Road. These were over my head. Um, Spiky, tall, pointy. Um, it's an infestation that's best handled early on. If you can see where teasel is starting to grow and you head out with gloves and some snippers, loppers, pruners, cut it off as close to the base, or even if you can dig in just a little bit below the basal rosette leaves of this plant, snip off that whole tall stalk, and then snip those seed heads, these flowers that are forming. Some people have said, oh, you can just leave them on the ground. I'm always a little wary of that because it's just such a super plant. I could see it continuing to develop even when those flowers are removed from the mother plant and left behind on the ground. So I feel more comfortable putting them in a black plastic garbage bag and disposing of them in a trash can. Don't leave them to dry somewhere. Don't you want to make sure that they are not going to re-enter the ecosystem somewhere else. But it's a plant that so manual removal is one route. When there's a large swath of it, it's usually best handled by herbiciding. I am not a licensed applicator or operator of herbicide chemicals, so I'm not going to get into that. There's certainly resources online if you want to learn more about it, or you can volunteer at a work day. Right now, our park district sites, the natural areas are pretty much clear of teasel. Some of our unnatural areas, our parks that are not maintained by our restoration crew do have some teasel trying to creep in. So it's a plant to be aware of, because now is the time. If you're seeing it creeping in somewhere close by where you are, this is a good time to get after it and cut it down before all those seeds reach the ground. If it is a larger area, sometimes it can take years because there's such a buildup of seeds in the soil. But it's definitely something, once you start to see it, and thank you, Greg, for opening my eyes to how many we have around here. Once you start to see it, you're going to start seeing just how much of it we have. Two interesting cultural connections. One, it was brought here for a purpose, teasel. It was used to tease wool, raise the nap. I don't know if it was used as part of the felting process, but it actually had an industrial application early on, which is one of the reasons it came here, why it was brought here. Two, it was often used in arrangements for funerals. So some of the places, and some of our last stands of original prairie here in Illinois are in old pioneer cemeteries. And then some of those people that it's kind of ironic. We've got, rare prairie plants, and then we've got teasel, and the teasel is a reminder of the funeral arrangements that were once laid on those graves. So anyway, teasel, it's happening now. Keep your eyes out for it. It's popping up in a lot of places these days. So now let's leave that behind. Let's talk about some native plants that are in bloom. I was lucky enough to spend some time over at Pearson Creek Fen the other day, and this is a plant. I'm going to move this bar out of the way. This is called Culver's root, and it grows fairly distinctively. It's got these white spires, these spikes of flowers at the top. And then if I move this out of the way, I think we'll be able to see the foliage. Well, the flowers too, they grow in whorls around the stem. And you can just see down here at the bottom. Maybe we can zoom in. Can bring this down here. See how the plant, I think there's 5 leaves that grow in a whorl around the stem of the plant. It's actually a plant I bought several small culver's root this year at the Hickory Knolls plant sale. And I didn't want to put them in the ground while it was so dry. And now that it's wet out, I haven't had a chance to get them in the ground, but I'm hoping to have this in my yard. Get it planted this year and maybe get some blooms next year or the year following. There's a lot of yellow happening right now. We're just on the cusp of the prairie's time to shine. I'm going to move this down here now. This is one of our Rudbeckia or black-eyed Susans. We've got 2 or 3 different species of Rudbeckia that grow here in Kane County. And then we've got these guys here who also at this time have a dark brown center, but this actually is going to fade away a little bit. And this is not a Rudbeckia. This is a flower called gray-headed coneflower. It's got a very distinctive, somewhat strong scent to it. And you notice how the petals point down. The Rudbeckia petals are nicely flattened out around the center of the flower. And here are gray-headed coneflower. There's a definite recurve or decurve aspect to these petals. Now this is neither a gray-headed coneflower nor a brown black-eyed Susan. This is a close-up look at the flowers of the compass plant. Compass plant, prairie dock, rosinweed, and cup plant are the 4 members of the genus Silphium that we have growing in this area. And they all get really tall stalks of yellow flowers. Each plant has some differences to it. We're going to look at 2 of them tonight. This is compass plant. There's another aspect of it. So towering overhead, these probably 7 feet tall or more flower stalks that are in bloom right now. Here's a look at the leaves, and look who is looking at the leaves with me. I was so excited. I enjoy plants. I'll never be a botanist or a native plant aficionado, but I do love my snakes, and I couldn't believe the luck. I wanted to show the cut leaf nature of the leaves of the compass plant, and this little garter snake was staring right back at me. So compass plant gets its name from the way these leaves supposedly orient themselves north and south. That sometimes this was just a big mass. I mean, they were pointing every which way, but supposedly the compass plant was used by pioneers as they were traversing the prairies. They could look at the way the leaves were pointing, and they could then discern what the 4 cardinal directions were. I don't know if there were snakes in the compass plants. I know as a pioneer, I would not have gone very far at all. I would have stopped to check out who was living there. So here we have a slightly different angle. It's funny, the snake and I, we regarded each other with the respect. I think it thought I was going to try and hurt it. I tried to keep a certain distance and just zoom in with my camera. Now, here's an opportunity. We can do a little snake identification. It is a garter snake. We know that by this dorsal stripe down the back and the sort of greenish, blackish color to these scales. Snake scales, you can count the scales. They're in rows, but they don't go straight across. They're on an angle. Now here, I'm going to point here to here's the belly scale. And then starting right here, this is scale row number 1. The scales are sort of diamond shaped. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so forth. So then we're up already to the mid stripe here, the dorsal stripe. In our area, we've got 3 different, 2 main species and 1 subspecies of garter snake. The common or eastern garter snake has a lateral stripe. See how it's kind of a yellowish color here? That's on scale rows 2 and 3. So if we start here again, so this is the belly scale. We don't count that because that goes all the way across the belly. We start with the diamond shaped one here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that falls on scale rows 2 and 3. So we know this is an eastern or common garter snake. Now, that subspecies we have in this area is the Chicago garter snake. And to make that determination, we need to have a better view of the snake's neck. Their Chicago garter snake will have some black bars going across that lateral stripe. I don't know if the other picture shows the neck at all. I don't think it does. He was wound around. Yeah, he was wound around that plant pretty good. Let's zoom in. We're not going to be able to zoom down. All right. So there's the other thing is because it's a subspecies, the common the species and the subspecies can breed, and that trait can be less noticeable. There's a little bit of a bar there. That's not really enough to call it a Chicago garter. We're just going to say this is a common garter snake, giving us snake eyes. So this is another member of the Silphium genus, which the compass, prairie dock, resinweed, and cup plant belong to. It was not in bloom yet. It gets a flower stalk similar to what we see on the compass plant, and it is the stem is coming up. That's going to have the flowers on it, but the flowers weren't in bloom yet. What I wanted you to see here is just how huge these leaves are. And these big veins, when you touch these on a hot day, they actually feel cool because they're carrying water up from underneath the ground where it is cooler. People in the old days were said to have picked these leaves and put them on their heads to cool off and create a little bit of shade. I wish I could have found a way to show you how rough the surface of these leaves are. That's a characteristic of all 4 members of the Silphium genus. It's an adaptation to preventing a lot of moisture loss in the prairie winds. The rough surface of the leaves breaks up that wind and helps the plant retain its moisture. But super cool plant. Very, very deep roots on these plants as well. They go 8-10 feet, sometimes more than that, down below the ground. Now this is a little plant called dogbane. Some people call it Indian hemp. And that by itself is kind of a cool plant. It's got a milky sap. I used to think that that was edible, that monarchs would feed on it, but Diane, I remember you told me no, that's not correct, and you are right. I did one time see a monarch caterpillar on a dogbane, but it was in its J formation, so it was actually getting ready to form a chrysalis. So it had left the host plant, the monarch that had been feeding on, and it went over to this other milky sapped plant in order to complete its metamorphosis. So that's a look at the dogbane. Indian hemp, this is hemp in a sense of cordage, not hemp in a sense of you can smoke it. This is a plant that was harvested, and the stems are very fibrous, and you can pull it apart, and you can actually make a pretty strong cord from this plant. Now, this little guy was sitting on the dogbane / Indian hemp, and I love it when this happens. So this is dogbane, right? This is a dogbane leaf beetle. Here's another view of them. It's not a Japanese beetle. Japanese beetles have more of a copper color to their shell, and they've got very distinct white lines around the bottom of the abdomen. This guy was just kind of hanging out, looking so very attractive. This was kind of a cloudy day, but boy, that metallic character to that shell just really shone on this dogbane leaf beetle. You can see the dogbane has a lot of bindweed on it. Bindweed is a member of the morning glory family. It's an introduced plant. Look, see how it's wound its way around the stems of the dogbane. We see it growing on lots of different species in sunny areas. Well, if you're lucky, you can look really close at the dogbane. I'm sorry, at the bindweed, and you'll see blobs like this. This isn't your ordinary blob, though. If you zoom in, we'll see there's a creature here. It has 6 legs. It looks like it has a lot of legs, but there's really only 6 legs under here. There's these forks here at the bottom of the abdomen. So just to orient you, the creature's head is here. The uh, hind end is here. All of this is a lovely mass of shed skins, cast exoskeletons, and frass, which is the sort of scientific word for insect poop. So this is the larvae of a tortoise beetle, and we have some tortoise beetles in this area that specialize in feeding on bindweed. So bindweed does a lot of things that are not so good. Namely, it binds up our the plants that it's growing on, and it can cause them to not thrive. The bindweed, the larvae that feed on the bindweed, though, they help control it. So whenever I see bindweed, I have to say I do get a little excited because I like to look and see if there's any tortoise beetles on the leaf. Let's take this from another angle. Let's zoom in. That is really a fine collection. This, of course, is it's a predator deterrent. You get a little creature like this that is soft-bodied and probably fairly nutritious. I'm sure it's got lots of protein and at the very least moisture in its body that a bird or other insect eating creature might enjoy. But when it's decorated with all of this yuck, it's not going to get eaten. So there you have the tortoise beetle on bindweed. And we've got some purple coneflowers here. This is uh, the genus Echinacea, which you might recognize as a medicinal plant. This is the same plant. Well, first the Native Americans and then the pioneers used it for a variety of ailments. It is looking really gorgeous these days. Again, this is the prairie at Fearson Creek Fen. Now we're going to switch gears. This was a little caterpillar I found last week. This was Nature Nerds. This is when we went over to Klein Creek Farm. This was first I thought this was a caterpillar that was relieving itself, and then I realized what was coming out was coming out of the head, not the tail. So something happened to this creature. I don't know if a bird plucked it or maybe it got a little stepped on, but it was really, really cool looking. Let's zoom in and take a look. You don't see a lot of this color, white on teal, and then this intriguing little orange blop here, which is not a result of being stepped on. This is actually part of the structure of this caterpillar. I at first was wondering if maybe it was a type of sawfly, but it doesn't have. Sawflies are they're not moths and they're not butterflies. They are in the Hymenoptera, or the bee and wasp order. There's little prolegs here. So there's the 6 legs that will stick with this animal as an adult. And then there's these sticky prolegs here. There weren't enough prolegs to qualify the sawfly. So we're looking at some kind of caterpillar, but what kind of caterpillar could it be? Well, this orange knob here is kind of a clue. We have a group of moths in this area called the sphinx moths, and as larvae, as caterpillars, they have a projection off of their tail. If you've ever picked a hornworm off of your tomatoes, you'd be familiar with that little appendage on a sphinx moth caterpillar. I did a little investigating and figured out that this was the larvae of a Abbott's sphinx moth. Now, the adult sphinx moth, here we are, where we've skipped over to Bug Guide here for a second. This is what an Abbott's sphinx moth looks like. Pretty cool. 30 millimeters, that's 3 centimeters, which is not quite 2, over 1.5 inches. And by that, we're not talking wingspan there, we're talking the length of the body. So this is a good sized moth. Wingspan 76 millimeters, so that's 7.5 centimeters. That's what, 5 inches or more. So good sized moth. Check out though how it gets to this stage. Let's go back here. The caterpillar has very distinct stages. It starts off looking like this. In fact, there's a better picture. No, that's the same picture. Starts off like this, and then it goes to this, and this is the stage I found it in. It's gray phase. I thought it was just a really stunning white on teal color is what I saw. And then it goes here. So it's still got that button there, but look at the color change. And then, where is the other? It gets this crazy here. Look at this. Same species. Isn't that wild? So yeah, I have not seen the moth or the caterpillar. This was at Klein Creek Farm, which is DuPage County. Generally, whatever they have in DuPage, we tend to see here. So keep your eyes out. Maybe you'll be lucky enough to find an Abbott sphinx moth caterpillar that hasn't been stepped on and that has a chance of pupating and turning into one of these really awesome looking moths. That's the hind wing. Is that cool, bright yellow pattern on it? Isn't that awesome? Keep your eyes open. They're out there right now. All right, where does the slideshow go? All right, so let's zoom back in. Got just a couple more pieces here. It looks like we are at 9 o'clock already. Okay, so this was a question that was sent in by a reader. This landed on their patio and they were wondering, what is it? Well, I have to say, I saw that fluff and my brain immediately went to our guest from earlier this evening, the woolly aphids that are flying around right now, the little fairy, white fluffy fairies that are being seen everywhere. Woolly aphids, completely different group of creatures. They usually have 2 different plant hosts, and it's really beyond me to try and key out one woolly aphid species from another, but they float around between 2 different plant hosts that they use during different parts of their life cycle. This, however, is not that. It is not a woolly aphid at all. If we zoom in on this picture, can we zoom in? Oh, we can't zoom in. All right, I'm just going to have to point it out. Right up here, there's the eyes, and up back here, this is going to form the wings. This is actually not a woolly, which here's a picture. This is what was flying around earlier. Said we could zoom in on the still photo. This these little creatures are all kinds of people are seeing woolly aphids these days. But what this creature is all right, you know what? I'm going to go back to Bug Guide, and I'll just pull up. That is a two-lined plant hopper. So when they're nymphs, they've got that. It looks like cottony material. It's actually a waxy material that they form. I'm pretty sure this seems to be the dominant species around here. This is the two-striped plant hopper. This one happens to be from Pennsylvania, but there are records from all around the Chicago area. Bug Guide has this neat feature. If you create a free account with them, you can use their data. So they track whenever anyone sends in an image, you have to give the county and the state where you found it. You can actually go, once you have an account, you can click on the state. And first of all, you see the months that it occurs, and then you can look at the individual records and see where they were found. So here we've got some downstate. There's Champaign. Here's Winnebago County, which is up by Rockford. DuPage County. Here's Kane County. Down in the Iroquois, Kankakee. They're all over, but this is enough reassurance that this is a species that's likely to be seen here in Kane County, the two-lined plant hopper. Pretty cool, huh? That's the adult form. And here it is. It almost looks like it's, like spraying smoke or flames or fire or something, doesn't it? Pretty neat. Keep an eye open for these two. This picture was just sent in this weekend, so they are out and about in our great wide world too. All right, folks, that's what I had for you this week. I'm going to stop the share here. Next week, we've been getting some information from our restoration crew about a bird that's nesting at Pearson Creek Fen. I want to get a little bit more information on that before we share it, but you can look forward to learning about that bird and maybe some other birds that are still nesting in this area. I think things got kind of an early start. I think we're seeing a lot of birds that are on their second, and maybe some are even going for a third clutch of eggs, a third brood here this summer. So we'll be talking about that and lots more when we get together next week. Now, before we sign off here, this is just so great that our connection has held this long, isn't it? Knock on wood. Let's take a look at it. Teasel of nightmare. You said it, Meredith. It really is everywhere. I see it. Like if I am heading east on Route 38, they're doing so much construction there now with the new warehouses and everything that are going in, and all those mounds of dirt are just mounds of teasel. It really, hopefully some of those mounds of dirt will go away, but yeah, this thing, boy, once it gets its, its little foot in the door, boy, it just really takes off. It says the British Isles dried teasel seed heads were used to raise the nap on newly washed woolen cloth. Usually they need thick leather gloves and an apron for protection. Yeah, and that's kind of what they were describing here, and it was brought here for a purpose. They said to tease the nap of the wool. But boy, talk about something that got out of hand. Dogbane is poisonous to grazing animals, I believe. It might be, Laura. That sounds right. These things with milky sap generally are very bitter tasting, and maybe dog bane. Maybe maybe dogs don't like it either. Oh. Monarch cats will not feed on milkweed. However, milkweed tussock cats will. Oh, that's interesting.
I'm sorry, Pam, I wrote that wrong. It's they won't feed on dog bane.
Well, that is interesting. So the monarchs are a little more discerning then, and they
Yeah,
will.
apparently.
I remember you taught me that. You taught
And
me.
I follow a lot of different monarch rearing groups on Facebook, and I've actually heard of some people have actually transferred the milkweed tussock moth to dogbane to protect and save
protect
their
them.
milkweed.
Oh, sure.
If they have a shortage of milkweed, they're trying to save it. So
Yeah,
because the tussock moth, the colony of tussocks will totally decimate a plant within days. So
mow it down. Oh, that's good to know. I might pass it along because every year I'll hear from at least one or two people who have found the tussock moths, and I always think they would make a great mascot for St. Charles East because of the colors. They're orange, they're black, they got a little white. Go Sussex.
They're pretty cute actually, but they're pretty destructive.
Yes, they are. But that's good to know that you can just move them over. And dogbane it, boy, that's another one. It is a native plant, but it can proliferate too, because those seeds, those flowers create a lot of seeds too.
Yes.
That's a good tip. I will pass that along, Diane. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And yeah, common milkweed can be toxic to, like I said, not to rabbits and deer. Wow. So, I finally have milkweed again in my front yard. It had gone away. Well, actually I dug a lot out the last couple of years because it got that yellows syndrome. I think it's a bacteria. There's some sort of pathogen that causes the leaves to be very narrow and yellow. The whole plant just looks kind of sickly, and the only way to get rid of it is to just dig it all up and destroy it, get rid of it. So then I went a year or so without milkweed. I finally got some, but I haven't really seen much activity at all on it. Not beetles, not milkweed bugs. I haven't seen, of course there's earwigs. But
yes.
But I have a bunny. My point is that I've got a couple of smaller milkweeds that are starting to come up, and there's a bunny out there. I'll have to see if maybe I would have had more milkweed had I not had the rabbit.
Well, I sat there and I was looking out the window, and there was a milkweed plant, and it wasn't that small. It was probably between 12, maybe 16 inches tall.
Okay.
And I saw the rabbit, and it actually got on its haunches and reached up and pulled off a good sized leaf and then ate it. And then did it 2 more times.
Isn't, boy, yeah, you'd think there would be, between just like the clover and you'd think there would be so many other things that would taste better.
I don't know. Maybe because things are so dry right now. Maybe it's the liquid of the milkweed. I don't know.
Maybe well, and I remember a few years ago we did a program, one of our outreach programs was on monarchs, and we did a look at how a female monarch selects the plant that she's going to lay her eggs on. And they're part of those brush-footed butterfly, that group where their first 2 legs are, they can sense, and they will actually select plants that have some of the cardiac glycoside chemicals in it, but they don't want too much because it could even be too potent for the tiny caterpillars. So they select, they want it to have some, and maybe the rabbit can sense a plant that has some, but not a lot.
That could be.
I wonder. Oh,
it could be.
The more we learn we don't know, right?
I know. That's true.
Well, that looks like that brings us to the bottom of the chats, and it brings us to 10 after 9. So we did a little bit more than our usual hour, but I so very much appreciate you tuning in and sticking it out till the bitter end. And we'll do it again next week. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Pam.
Thanks, Pam.
Always
Have a good night.
fun.
See you soon.
Thank you, Pam.
Bye.
Thanks, Pam.
Oh, there it is. Bye.